Hey, it's Karina Reichman, and you are listening to Comes a Time with Oteil Burbridge and Mike Fenoya. If you're digging the podcast, do these guys a favor and review and subscribe. It means a lot. Be sure to follow the pod on social media, YouTube, and if you're joining for bonus episodes and exclusive content, go to patreon.com/comesatimepod and get on the bus. And now, here's Mike and Oteil.
Hey, what up? Happy New Year. Welcome back to another episode of Comes a Time. That's Oteil.
And that's Mike. What's up, Bubba?
Hi, Bubba. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, man. And a good one it is.
Getting excited for Dead Ahead in Mexico. Can't wait. It's going to be a hoot. It's going to be exciting. We're all going to be there. The whole Comes a Time crew. So I'm excited to play fun beach games with Eric and watch you play some tunes. So it's going to be a blast. Excited to see all the Comes a Time fans there. Keep an eye out for us, folks, because we're going to be passing out some stickers and some, say hi, take a picture, do all that crap. We're going to have a good time. So it'll be fun.
And oh, by the way, somebody's going to be doing a comedy show, right?
Well, yeah, let's not get too, hopefully. The plan is that I'll be doing stand-up. So I'm not sure if it's going to be on the itinerary you guys get, but it may be a little pop-up stand-up, which is always fun, especially for people that aren't expecting it and don't want it. So, there are going to be people there that love it. And then there's going to be people there that are like, what the hell's going on? But it's going to be great. I promise. So I'm very excited for that. Today we had a pretty cool guest. We had Andy Logan. He's the founder and president of Grateful Guitars Foundation. And he's also a psychotherapist operating out of a private practice in Woodside, California. And you, I think, Oteil, worked on a project with him, maybe a documentary.
Yes, it's called Grateful. The Music Plays the Band. And it's on the musical legacy of the Grateful Dead and their countless tribute bands. Andy's also the steward of Jerry Garcia's Alligator guitar and Martin D28 and Bob Weir's Koa and Walnut Black Knives.
Wow.
And two Alvarez acoustics, all played on stage with the Grateful Dead. And he has a large collection of Grateful Dead stage used backline. So I actually would like to. I forgot to tell him, can I come plug my bass into some of those things? So, but he's really, really cool. This was one of my favorite conversations we ever had, right, Mike? Like, I know I always say that, but
yeah, they're all doozies. And it was just cool because I think it was just conversational, you know what I mean? Like, and it just went immediately to where it needed to go. And you guys need to this is one half of the conversation. It went a whole hour longer. And it's all over on the Patreon. So like, we're going to be doing a lot more of that too. So if you want to hear the full conversation, go to patreon.com/comesatimepod. And we're putting a bunch of bonus content over there, but this one you're getting like 2 episodes in one, essentially. So he's brilliant. And it's so nice, it's cool when people are passionate and heartfelt and empathetic and just tuned in, and he's all those in one. So I appreciate him joining, and he's another on the list of must-haves to come back for sure.
Absolutely. When someone's heart is as big as their mind is, I really love that. And don't forget, we're also going to be shooting some Comes a Time stuff backstage. So when we get back from Mexico, we'll have whatever upcoming Comes a Time stuff's going to have some yummy backstage.
Patreon. Yeah.
See? Mm-hmm. Get on that Patreon, folks.
Well, and thank you guys all. And thanks for the folks that are already over there. We really appreciate you. And thank you for all of you listening. And, if you are liking the podcast, please click subscribe. It goes so far. And, I heard other podcasts saying this, and I don't think there's any shame in asking you guys, the more likes we get on YouTube and the more followers we get on socials, the bigger and badder and better guests we can get. That's
Yeah.
currency these days, and it's free for
Yeah.
you. And all you have to do is go click the button that says you support us. So if you guys wouldn't mind doing that, it takes a second and it means the world. So leave us a review and all of those things. And it means a lot. And the more we put in and the more you put in, the more we can, generate back towards you. So thank you for all
Yeah.
of the support thus far. And, we
And
have to
thank
be
you for
approaching 200 soon. I would imagine. I can't remember. I lost count, but I mean, like, if you want 200 more, like, this is crowd funded and crowd supported. So please help us out, help you. So thank you for all of it, guys.
Yes, absolutely. And those comments help too. A lot. It tips the algorithm. And I've been
Yeah.
trying to get on there and comment back. So thank you guys and enjoy.
See you next time, everyone.
Oh man, thanks for hanging out with us today. It's good to
I
see you.
It's so great to see you guys. I am so excited to be here with you guys because I've watched a few of your shows and you guys get deep and I love that. I so love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we had you on because you and I have been texting and stuff, and you were like, well, I should let you tell the story maybe, but you had told me like this podcast really had a profound effect on your life. And I thought it'd be cool for our fans and for me and Mike, first of all, to
Yeah, I'm
hear
dying to hear this.
what that was.
Well, just for me, watching Big Steve, because he got really deep with you guys. And just, it's not like there was one moment per se. It's just that you guys are willing to go there. I'm a psychotherapist in my day job, and um, I have a huge goal of making the world a better place. And, one of the things that's really, really challenging is the number one cause of mental illness is repressed emotion. And it's such a basic idea, right? And I wish that was all over billboards, like all over the world, because it's just such a simple idea, right? Don't
Yeah.
repress your emotions. Unfortunately, culturally, right, that's kind of all we do, right? We stuff it all down, like especially mortality, the big one, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm so glad we're meeting now because like the veil's thinner. This is a good time to get to those places. Because one of the things I love about the Grateful Dead is the skull and roses, right? It is both, if you want to
Yeah.
do want to look at it like, a dyad or whatever, but I like to think everything is gray, but whatever. Basically, it's all of it. And we have to be able to sit in all of it. And you guys do that. You get deep, you talk about everything. And that's what it's all about, right? I mean, that's why I feel like a lot of us were attracted to this. It's not just all about the roses and Sunshine Daydream or whatever, right? It's victim
Oh
of the
no.
crime,
Right. Yeah. 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 When life looks
Um,
like easy street, there's danger at your door.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm just really excited because I love talking about all the happy good stuff, but I also I really want to make sure it's always with a foot in that other door because first of all, I think that's the only way we appreciate, the really good stuff. But also just out of that idea of not repressing, right? Because it's so sad, like when we're pushing down, whatever those intense emotions are, those feelings because we suffer internally. And then obviously, that can lead to, depression or anxiety and things like that. And whereas if we just share a little, it doesn't have to be major. I get it. Like not everybody wants to hear all about the horrible things that are going on for everyone. However, I like to let people know, like this has been a really tough year on the family health front for me. I want people to know that because I don't want them to be like, "Hey, man, let's talk," and then I'm a little distracted or a little weird because they don't
Yeah.
know something's going on, right, for me. And I know that
Yeah.
we're all really perceptive, right? So, we pick up on these little cues. And sometimes, I've felt that where people are like, oh, I don't think he's into this pitch. I'm not sure he's getting into this. And it's like, no, it's not it. My dad's in the hospital or whatever. Like that's all that's going on. This isn't
Yeah.
about what you're sharing here. So,
Yeah.
you guys keep it real. And so I'm very, very happy to be talking to you both.
Thank you, man. I think we get it from the British. We have an essentially British culture because it's the stiff upper lip and all that crap, Men don't cry. It's like I liken it to squeezing a balloon. Like you think you're pushing it down or you think you're burying it. You think you're digging a hole and then covering it up with dirt. But what you're really doing is you're squeezing a balloon and it comes out over here. And
Exactly.
eventually that balloon's going to pop.
Right.
And so
Right.
it's better if you can not do a balloon, but say there's a valve and you can let some air out, gradually by talking. Because not only do you feel like people don't want to hear it, a lot of people are scared to reveal.
Well, that's it. That's it. I think that's the big thing. I think that once you start going down the tunnel, before you can see that there's another end to the tunnel, you turn tail and run and go, I'm not going in that tunnel because it's a long, deep, dark tunnel. And no matter how many people are telling you you're not alone, when you're in it, you feel alone. Like that's difficult.
It's so
Well,
true,
in
Mike.
some ways, I think you are alone, right? Because
Yeah,
your
you are.
specific, whatever trauma or whatever situation is unique to you.
Right.
So there's some things you can only like a mama can only I can't help her with pushing the baby out. I can hold her hand and let her cuss me out. But,
Yeah, and you are, I mean, I'm sure you guys have had this experience, right? The notion of like when you're going through hard times, you learn who your friends are, right? And sometimes it's not the people you expect, right? There's some people who are super kind and caring, and you're like, oh, these people are going to be amazingly supportive. And maybe there's something on in their life you don't know about, whatever, but maybe they just weren't as much. Then there's someone else who maybe you barely know and you feel like you only know them on a business level or something. And then they turn out to be just so empathic and warm about it. And you're like, wow, like that is so cool. They were so there for me in that time. So it is interesting how we discover, those relationships in that time. But I agree with you, Atil, that we are alone because I do feel like at least it feels like it intermittently because people can only do so much of the empathic thing, right? And sometimes they just get tapped out or whatever it is. Even like I broke my leg in 2021 and my wife is amazingly supportive and my sons are amazingly supportive. But at some point you can feel that little cranky energy, right? Like getting real tired of this, and you're like laying there like, I'm sorry, I broke my
Yeah,
leg.
I know.
But, and I've worked with terminally ill patients, and I know that happens too, to the worst stories, right? The worst cases, people get fed up and they get kind of cranky or whatever. And it's a terrible feeling, right? Because they don't want to be judging someone who's sick. And
Yeah.
if you're the person, you don't want to be judged for being sick. That was never a choice you made.
Mm.
yeah.
But there
And
is a sort of sense of that.
I'm kind of in the belief that, and I'd love your thoughts as a practitioner. I believe that people that have gone through a certain sense of trauma, or a certain, and look, we all have, right? It's just to varying degrees and how it's affected us, whether it's long term, short term. I think that there is some familial responsibility or guilt that of like, I can't be too honest, or I can't be too open, or I can't be too, because it might hurt people I love, or it might,
yeah,
and then you start making excuses for people and you go, well, they tried their best, or they this, or they that. And that's a issue. I think that a lot of generational stuff
mhm.
is dealing with, because how do I, metaphorically, how does one, the royal we, address and tell our story when there's characters in our story that are maybe still a part of, our life and stuff, and you want to help and you want to tell your story so you can help other people, but you're scared to tell 100% of it. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to come to terms with, where it's like, no, I don't want to hurt anyone, so let me just eat this emotion. And
Well, we're doing it publicly too. So that's,
I'm not even yeah,
yeah.
no, of course, but
So
yeah.
it's like the kid that, or a person that goes to someone they trust and they go, well, my friend is, and they're
Well,
really talking about
right, of course,
themselves.
yeah. Well, what made me think about it too was like someone was talking about John Leguizamo, like someone saw an interview with him after one of his specials where he talks about his family like a lot. And they said, like, how do your siblings feel about this? And he goes, oh, no one talks to me. Like my whole family's like, we're just not. So it's almost this thing of kind of like, yeah, whether you're speaking about it on stage, in a book, at a, conference, TED Talk, self-help, all of this trauma probably has to do with an interpersonal relationship, right? And there's a 50-50 chance that those other people are still alive, right? So from a practitioner standpoint, like how do you help people to address that and own that and go, this is your story? Or, do you know what I mean? Is this a probably isn't a new notion?
Well, no, and it totally, you're right. It's kind of the core notion, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and historically we've been terrible at this. Both my grandfathers weren't alive when I was born. One of them died in World War II, and my grandmother married another man who was in World War II, who was a Marine, and he became a captain. They called them battlefield promotions because I think when he was on the beaches of Palau, when he got there, he was like a lieutenant or whatever, right? And because of people dying, he became.
I just kept going.
Yeah,
Jeez. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I was really curious about World War II because of my grandfather who died in the Navy, and so I always wanted to ask him about it. And my grandmother, she lost her first love, right, in World War II, so she probably didn't want to hear a thing about it, right? And also
Mm.
because she was from that generation where you didn't talk about it, right? So she would leave the room and things like that. But I still would ask the questions because I wanted to know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was bold that way, I guess. But he told me horrendous stories about his experiences. And I thought a lot about that as I became a therapist. He died without going to therapy, like
Yeah.
probably almost everybody, right, through those generations who went through, World War II or the Depression or whatever the different things are. And it's so sad. Now, I am a spiritual person. I believe that we are cleansed at the end. I don't know why. I just feel like that's something. And I felt like when he died that he was cleansed of that pain.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I hope.
still really sad, to think that you walk around for decades with this, horrible imagery. And I remember when he died, I was on Kauai. We spent a lot of time there, and I was looking at the blue water and the palm trees, and I was like trying to imagine World War II. You know what I mean? Like it's so beautiful, right, in the Pacific Islands, but not when there's war, right?
Yeah.
Hell on
How
earth.
Yeah, hell on earth, exactly. Like, and you're trying to juxtapose like this incredible beauty, and maybe, he was from the East Coast, maybe he never seen any beauty like that. And then also there's blood in the water and bombs, and it had to be such a mind, you know what? I don't know if I can swear on the show.
You
Go
can.
Um,
for it. Yeah.
yeah, a mind fuck. And and yet no one to talk to about it, right? You get back and everyone's like, we won, and we're all excited and things. And I'll just share, like my grandfather died. There was a typhoon that hit in October of 45. And so the Navy and the military was all in Okinawa preparing to invade Japan. And they had these bombs, obviously, and they didn't know how that was going to go. So they were there to do this horrible deed. And at the time, Japan had been praying for a divine wind. And they had historically, that had been a thing, that they had prayed for divine winds. And one time they had done that, like when China was coming to attack. I can't remember what years, but say like the 1500s or whatever it was. And the fleet was coming to attack Japan, and they prayed for a divine wind, and a typhoon took it out. So,
Wow.
yeah, right. I mean, it's amazing. And so the emperor was calling for prayers for another divine wind to take out the invading force that was coming. And amazingly, one did come in October 45. Typhoon Louise hit, and because the fleet was in Okinawa, in the Bay of Okinawa, which is, like any bay would be shallow. The idea, if you're in a typhoon or any hurricane, you want to get out to sea. You want to be in deep water.
Mm. Mm.
So unfortunately, the storm hit and took out the fleet, and not the entire fleet, but his boat was rolled over a reef. He was killed. And if you look up Piper Louise, you'll see like just
Wow.
Navy ships all over this beach.
Wow.
And it's not well known because same kind of thing, post-war, we're done with hardship,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear about that. So, if you had all that trauma, you didn't get to talk about it. Nobody wanted to hear it, and everybody had to dig deep, whether you were Rosie the Riveter or somebody, over there, so to speak. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, yeah, that is in our history, right? And people, stoicism, and I totally agree that it's sort of like Northern European stuff, right? Like, we don't talk about things like that. Or the notion of like a gentleman is only in the paper, I think, what, on his wedding day and in his obituary or something. There's some saying like that. That if you want the
Sounds
crown,
right.
they
Yeah.
talk about that in the crown, that kind of notion, right? But Mike, the long answer here, the way you do it is the way you did it. You talk, right? How we deal with these things is we talk about them. So if I'm sharing a story about my dad, who I love, but who, has faults. If I'm talking about that to my sons, or even like, something like publicly like this, he's great. He's a wonderful man who did the best he could with everything, all the tools he was given. And, that moved the ball a little bit. And,
Yeah.
I get to move the ball a little bit more, thankfully, because I'm a part of this generation where I feel like we've accelerated some of this stuff.
Absolutely.
But the
Yeah.
bottom line is that, I think it's the framing, right? So if we say, honey, I just want to tell you, you're an amazing chef. I love like 95% of everything you make, but I got to tell you this one dish, like, but it's all about the framing.
It sure is. It sure is about the framing. That's true. I guess the reason why I ask is because, like after, our podcast, Oteil and I, and then I've talked on a couple others just about my own experience with like going through that tunnel. I've talked to a lot of people and they almost kind of start to come out to me about their anxiety or depression or whatever. And I'm starting to realize it. And I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of people holding on to a lot of stuff. And it's just this. And when you're in the funk, you don't think you're the only one, but you're alone in your, bubble. But when people start to talk to you and you kind of, I end every, like if I'm talking to someone after a show, because I'm trying to talk about stuff on stage more, and people come up after and I'm like, listen, I'm sure there are like great professionals in your area. Like, do you have insurance? Like check with your insurance. They'll put you in touch with someone. Like you don't have to go through this by yourself. And I'm not a doctor. So you know what I mean? Cause I'm not. And I'm like, I almost need to like bring like HIPAA forms to like comedy clubs now.
Well, it's you because say you can't afford to go see someone. A lot of people, like I know, way in the past, that's what community. It's like Black people had that church environment where it's like getting all the emotions out, the music and stuff, and there's like a support system there. Not that there weren't deep dark secrets in there too, but if you could find someone that has been through the same thing, and then you can open up to them about that, because sometimes the being honest will isolate you, like with your family and stuff. Everybody's not ready to open up at the same time,
right?
Everybody's not ready to even acknowledge that at some point they should probably open up at the same time.
Yeah. So
when your flower blooms and it's like, I'm ready to get the sun on my face, and you're digging out stuff, and especially when it starts to help, And you go, oh my God, this is such a cathartic thing. And then you want to help other people, and then they just clam right up, because they're just not ready yet for that kind of honesty. So it's like, if you could just kind of keep your eye open, and I've reached out in every way that I can. I mean, obviously we're doing this now with the podcast, like intentionally trying to be more brave.
Yeah.
And even if they can't talk to us, they can like get a little more courage, because it's hard, man, that aloneness. But then there's also the other side where I'm sure both of you have been through the thing where maybe you've come through something, you see someone in whatever addiction or trauma, post-trauma, and you see where they're at in their arc, and you try to help them, but they're not ready yet.
Yes.
And it's like, and you can watch them die from their addiction because you can't help them unless they let you. That's the most frustrating.
Yeah.
Totally. And from the side of the healing one, like as a therapist, I have watched intergenerational traumas be hugged out in an hour.
Yes.
It's so simple.
It's so simple.
If they just had to talk it out, like admit it. I saw this with a band. They, remember when Metallica had that therapy session for the band, and I've been in the bands where, they just been through 5 wives, but they never had any therapy for each other. So the band's been together way longer than any of their relationships, but the relationships are toxic, and there's this one, a lot of the younger bands after watching Metallica are like, hey, maybe we should get some therapy. So I won't say the name, but this friend of mine, he said, dude, we got a therapist and we talked everybody into coming and sitting out. And they found out that one guy had thought that 2 of the other guys had stolen this money. Really not even, I think it was like 10 grand or something. I forget what it was, but he thought they had stolen some like 12, 15 years way back. Right. And they were like, dude, that's what this is. And so they were like, they drug out the books and they were like, you look like,
wow.
And it's like, oh, sorry. It's just but this is the thing about stuffing it down. Like when you say, I've seen intergenerational stuff get hugged out in an hour, there just needed to be that push for the courage, to be honest, the courage to show up, the courage to admit what it is. And then you would be like, oh, with that light on the dark situation, sometimes it can, and that's gotta be amazing for you as a therapist. Like,
it is. I wish it wasn't rare though. I mean, I hate to say it. It is rare, and it's sad because part of me is like, you're just like, if we could just get to there at this all, it's like a combination lock. If we could just get everybody
at the same time.
Your point, it doesn't happen very often. People get resistant, and a part of it too, is the addicted to the drama idea, and to use pop psych term, but that's sort of a part of it, right? Some people don't want to let go of whatever that old beef is, and it's serving something, and it might not be a good thing per se, but it's still serving something for them in their mind, and they don't want to let
I think that's our culture too, though, because you see it politically, and I'm just now starting to rise above that. Of course, it's because I think there's no good guys now, but I think we would rather have somebody to blame than be willing to compromise. So it's like, you're just totally evil. And like the craziest conspiracy theorists, I've said this multiple times on the podcast, they talk like, I use Pizzagate. Okay. But it's not a small kernel. It's a big ass kernel of truth in there that crosses both sides. Because we know this with Jeffrey Epstein, because I'm here where it happened. I'm 20 minutes from West Palm, where all that went down. And it's like the private island and the private planes. And now I know, I'll get private gigs on a private island. And I'm like, hey, what? I don't mean to be suspicious. But when I took a chance because my other buddies went, and there's like, I'll see all the wives are there. I'm like, cool, we're there. All the wives are here. But, not to get off the track, but it's like, if we could realize that we have more to gain by trying to not always just shoot everything down, because that I almost think the Pizzagate was a disinfo thing and that's my conspiracy mind, but I know how this shit works. And so it's like, oh, they're on the track, so let's throw them this bone that's going to be like totally ridiculous,
Right.
so that now we don't have to discuss Epstein and across both sides of the thing.
Right.
So that's just one example. You know, how many other things are there like that? Yes, they're like, you can't trust your government. I'm with you. But then there's all the other stuff that's so far out, and I'm like, if I were to say I agree with you here, now can we start from this kernel and come somewhere to the middle, you know?
So my son, my oldest son, is a philosopher, and so we talk a lot about philosophy and psychology in my house.
What a
And-
fun house you guys have. I'm sorry.
Woo!
You just said my son is a philosopher. What an unbelievable, that's wow. That's the first time I've ever heard that sentence, and it's a badass sentence, dude.
Right. Next time you're here in the Bay, come hang with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, dude,
Yeah.
It's really fun. Yeah. And so, but a lot of it is, breaking it down, right? That's really the key. And so like when you talk about politics or whatever, if we just took the time to say, what do you want from life? Right? Obviously, right?
The same things.
Exactly. Right. You wouldn't
Yeah.
see the delta that you see, right? The delta is, I think, massively overhyped by the media, right? I mean, I know a free press is good and all that, but yeah, money, clickbait, feeding all the fighting online, instead of the puppy photos and the cool things, they made, and this is where Silicon Valley, my area, is to blame, they made the clicking all about anger and, negativity. And because we have negativity bias, right? That's a very important idea as a psychotherapist, right? We all have negativity bias. We are wired that way. And, people say, okay, why are we wired that way? Well, it's because evolutionarily, right? If you walked upwind of a tiger or whatever, or a bear, and you lived to tell it, you beat the crap out of yourself about it because you fucked up. You were an idiot, you really blew it, and you had to beat the crap out of yourself to keep yourself alive. And actually, like talking about anxiety, like human beings are descendant from the most anxious. Truly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually in our DNA.
I was listening to a thing on NPR this morning about how it's like the Neanderthal DNA. If you wake up early, if you tend to wake up earlier in the day, I heard this morning. If you tend to wake up earlier in the day, you have more of a Neanderthal strain of DNA because they were alert earlier and kind of like you slept to recharge.
Early bird.
You had to wake up and be like, all right, is the woolly mammoth like attacking? Is someone taking my food? Like there's this ancient kind of survival brain that gets you up
Sleeping with
faster.
one eye open.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an anxiety. I mean, anyone with anxiety knows. I mean, when I was going through the thick of it, my brain would start spinning out of control before my eyes even opened. So it was just like first thing, it was like, what'd you screw up yesterday that you have to fix now? What didn't you get done that was on that list? And then by then I'm exhausted and I haven't even opened my eyes.
Sorry to laugh,
but no, it's true.
Like,
it's good to laugh about it now. But I mean, at the time I was like, and I could see how someone who doesn't know you could get help would wake up and open a beer or wake up and do a line or wake up and
bake.
Yeah.
Right. Wake and bake.
Like I just quit smoking pot and it was like probably 5 days ago.
Wow.
And it wasn't like ruling my life, but I was like, what are you trying to dull down? Even if you're just trying to dull it down, like, what are you afraid of, man? You've quit this before. I went 2 years without smoking pot, like around the year 2000. But I just like, and I am facing, I'm now is no dull anything, and I'm only 5 days in, but I'm like, I'm going to do this because I'm glad you said that about the Neanderthals, because I'm going to remind myself of that, that hyper anxious, they got wiped out. It didn't work.
Yeah. Well,
Didn't.
and what's interesting, right? And what wiped them out? Things they can't control. And that's really what it boils down to, is the thing of like, yeah, you can be vigilant and you can
Yes.
freak out about stuff, but can you control? Is it about
There's a
something?
line.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that's
There's a
where, to me, love and fear, that's where that comes in, where it's like, am I just scared right now of nothing? And
Well,
that's a
I
lot
think
of
we're
that
always scared that
generational stuff.
I think we're always scared that love is not wrong. I mean, that love is not right. Because love says ultimately, it's going to be okay, or we can get you through the worst. I can
Right.
get you through the worst if I were to personify love, right?
Yeah.
And then the fear says, bullshit. Look at the Neanderthals, bullshit. Look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, bullshit. Like, you could throw up a million things to call love a liar. But those things are eventually going to destroy you if you listen to it. And if you actually listen to love, it'll save you. And I really believe that,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm putting my chips over there this time.
Well,
I'm with 100%.
you said something earlier that made me think of a line from one of the recent Wilco albums. Tweety has a lyric that says, "There's no middle when the other side would rather kill than compromise." And it's just this thought of kind of like, when you're in, you do the work, or look at things from love, and then you look at the other side and they're looking at things from fear and hate and closed-mindedness. It's hard to have a middle. It's hard to have a meeting ground when the other side is literally like, I'd rather die than say you're right and I'm wrong. Like, I'd rather die than go, I'm sorry, or I'd rather, and that's and that's to go back to even the earlier, just like how you deal with this stuff from a psychoanalytical standpoint. Like, when you want there to be a middle ground, but the other side is, everything's divided, right? Everything's 50-50.
But sometimes that's a yet thing too. I've always constantly going back to the word yet, and it's harder macro, because sometimes that yet it's going to take a much longer time. But like, I know so I feel that's why I want to move to another country, for instance, because I'm like, they ain't ready yet. And by the time they're ready, it's going to be like so bad that I just need to I need to move away from it. But now I'm thinking, it's like Dan Carlin said. He had this podcast called Hardcore History, and he said, as a historian, I've seen just when you think something's going to go a certain way, the force or the universe or whatever you want to call it deals a wild card out. And you'll see it in Genghis Khan, fall of the Roman Empire, Napoleon, like whatever. He'll just go through and he goes, and here comes the wild card. So again, when you feel like it's hopeless, like right now, it looks like we're headed for a second civil war. Like, I was encouraged that Trump that he can't do a thing in Colorado. But I know that ain't going to fix it, because when you squeeze that balloon this way, right? And so it feels hopeless. It feels like unavoidable. But I'm also keeping an eye out for the wild card,
Sure.
And that's the part of me where it's like, exactly, if you could still believe, if you could still have some kind of hope in the darkest of times, it's really hard to put your chips on that when it seems like such a friggin' long shot.
Totally. And as men as well, right? I mean, because you mentioned
Western men right now in this location and time, right?
Yeah, we're not being raised in the way that I wish personally on that front, right? I mean, I was a little league coach for a little bit when my sons were doing that, and it was fascinating watching how the boys were treated, right? And just as a window into my own upbringing and things, because like as an example, you're the coach, you're on the mound a lot, helping pitch or watch everything,
Yeah.
and invariably, the kid gets beamed with a line drive, on the mound. And so he's lying there on the ground crying, and I'm a therapist, so I'm like, oh buddy, that looked like that really hurt. Oh man, and I'm joining, right? That's what we call that. I'm joining him. And then out runs his mom and she lifts him up and is saying, "You're good, you're fine." Basically, shut up. I mean,
Yeah, he's not fine.
he's not fine. And I watch him, all those things, right? And I'm like, oh, you
Yeah.
know,
But that's
because
not even the worst of it. How do you deal with the sports parent, the dad that's, like, where you're just like, I'm terrified of this because Nigel's 8 and he doesn't really like sports, but he doesn't like team sports. But I live in fear of like the sports dad that's just a complete barbarian, making his kid cry on that's not how you do. And or even if I see it with myself, shades of it, not in sports but other things, it's like, wow, how am I going to deal with this guy? Because in our culture right now in Florida, I could get shot.
yeah,
I'm like, hey man, it's a kid, you're ruining the game for me, you shut up.
right,
It's like, whoa man, let's not get in a fight or somebody get hurt, maimed, or die over this game. Like, how do you deal with that?
right. And there was a dad I remember killed at a hockey game in Massachusetts a few years back. I remember
Yeah.
reading,
Yeah.
God, like
Yeah.
What?
dad fighting at
Yeah,
a
absolutely. It happened. There's fights all the time. My buddy coaches soccer for his 3 daughters, and it's like I went to a game and I watched them play, and the other team is sitting right at the same, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they're
they're
sharing
like
literally it's like you're sharing bleachers with like your enemy, I
the enemy.
guess. I mean, it's one town over, it's an imaginary line that a town made on a map 200 years ago, but still.
I died for my county. That's
Yeah,
what Colonel
yeah, I
Bruce
know,
used
right?
to
Yeah,
always
that's what
say,
he said,
right?
yeah. But anyway, like we're sitting there and it was like, there's a kid tried hard and just like slid tackled and like cleated a kid in the leg and the kid fell. And then the dad's yelling at the ref to kick that kid out of dirt, playing dirty. And then this dad's like, hey, shut up. That's my kid, teach him how to do this. And then it's just their egos are now, it's got nothing to do with the kids. It's got nothing to do with the kids. It's got everything to do with these two. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to get. And then finally one dad's like, all right, both of you shut up. And it shut him up. But I mean, yeah, I could see it escalating to waiting for him in the parking lot. And
yes,
yeah.
I know where you live.
Yeah.
Because we just had did an interview with Mark Henry, the world's strongest man, who still his records haven't been broken.
wow.
And collectively, and he's this hulking black dude. And he's like, I feel like I was born to shut that stuff down, because he can walk up to somebody and be like,
yeah,
do we have a problem? And they're just like, okay, never mind,
Yeah,
but in this hyper whatever society, I don't want to blame it on Trump because it's not him. I was going to say hyper Trumpy society. He's the symptom.
Yeah, I agree.
What's the word I'm looking for that I would replace with Trump, Andy? The hyper.
Oh, it's intense and sensitive and cranky, edgy.
Yeah.
And,
I hate
whatever
to even
the
use
adjective of a powder keg.
Yeah, like you could even like Mark Henry can't stop a bullet. Like in this time, somebody could be like, "Yeah, you embarrassed me in front of everybody else.
I could give you
I
an
had
example.
to back down, but I'm gonna catch you and I'm gonna pop a cap." You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing?
I'll give you an example of something that just happened to me the other day. It's a very awkward intersection where you kind of have like a sharp left, a regular left, and then kind of like a wide left. And there's exits from like a Home Depot and a bank, and it's just a cluster. And I was taking kind of like a wide left, and somebody else was taking a right out of a like Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. Cuts me and a couple other cars off, and a couple people beep, and the guy slams the brakes and rolls down his window, and he's got a full sledgehammer and he's holding it out the window and he's just swinging it, and he's going, and then he brings his hand back in and he's going, come on, come up here. And he's like sticking his head out the window. Like he wants to kill someone. Like he's like, just give me a reason to kill you. And he's got a full sledgehammer. Like, I'm not kidding. Like the handle was like this, and he's got it out his window in a van, and he's like swinging it against his van. And I'm like,
if you do that shit here, you know what's going to happen? The other car, a little hand's going to come out with a gun and be like, really?
That's the thing,
Really?
man. And it's
You
like,
want to do this?
right.
And
But
I'm like, what are we doing?
if you're crazy enough to have a sledgehammer out the window,
I mean,
I'm
God.
guessing the sledgehammer isn't the most dangerous thing in the car, first of all. And also,
I don't
like,
know.
why are you gonna? I just, to
You
me,
keep that sledgehammer in there, like you're waiting. You're essentially waiting for something. Give me a reason
I couldn't believe it. I
to
could
like.
not.
What kind of mindset is that?
I know,
And
but
that's common.
that's common. Oh, dude, I see stuff on the highway that's just, and we've talked about it a lot. But I mean, yeah, it's just everything's ready to pop off at any moment. You
And
know?
it's this repressed emotion, and that's what's so interesting. And I think especially too for us guys, right?
Yeah,
Because we are told that when we lead with love or kindness, that it's weakness, right? And
yeah,
strong men have that idea. And I don't cry, I don't say I'm sorry, right? You hear that a lot. And we all know that's bullshit, right? It's way harder to cry. It's way harder to apologize for something that you did, right? And Mike, you hit it on the head a minute ago, whatever, when you're saying ego. That's the problem. Like my son and I, that's what we talk about all the time. This is a battle against ego, right? And that's really what's happening here.
yeah,
We human beings have this belief that it's all about them, and our culture builds this up, right, with clickbait and all the different things. And there's this notion, and I'm in the valley here, so I see a lot of clients here who are in high tech and things like that. So Larry Ellison is like an idea, that people want to be like him, right? Super wealthy and all these ideas of having all the power, and you get to win America's Cup and be the richest guy and all these things. But I obviously, because I live here, I also hear all the stories of the other sides of those coins, right? The more personal human stories that aren't so positive and rosy, right? And so people, we don't know the personal karma of some of these human beings, right? They might look happy and rich and all that, even using Trump as an example, the guy doesn't look very happy to me, right? He looks like he's in his own personal hell,
yeah,
right? So, but it is all about that ego, right? We think that we're building ourselves up for something as if, and like I said, I used Larry as an idea, like you're going to get a first class suite if you die having a resume like Larry Ellison, right? That's the way we all live our lives, as if that is a true fucking statement that you better do all these things because when you die, you're gonna get checked into the rosewood in heaven, and they're, oh wow, look at this list. This is really impressive, Logan. You did all these amazing things. But that's a big gamble, right? Time is so precious,
yeah,
and what are we doing here? And so, like for me, like I said, I grew up without my grandfathers. My uncle also was killed in a car wreck. So there was a lot of loss in my upbringing, and my parents were divorced when I was young, and just for whatever reason, I've had a lot of people die around me. And Mike,
Mm.
NOT, I know you're the same. uh, we are the kind of people that people talk to, right? And I love it, I truly do. I mean, it's not
yeah,
always to take these phone calls or whatever it is, but thank God, people come and tell you their story, and they tell you their stuff, and then you feel great because someone's confided in you and you're sharing, your support and stuff like that. But also, you're not alone, right? When you hear these stories, hey, these guys struggle with this, I struggle with this. Okay, so we're not alone. But it is a little different as a guy because all the messages that we get are don't cry, right? It's that mom who runs out to the mound to say don't cry. And I believe the reason is because it's more upsetting. If you picture a guy on the street and and we've all seen this, right? Swearing and yelling and whatever. You maybe cross the street or whatever, but basically it's not that strange to see an angry man on the street. But if you see a man sobbing uncontrollably on the street, that's going to mess with you. That's going
yeah,
to that's going to be strange to see. So what I think what's kind of happened here is we want, these moms don't want their boys to cry because when the men cry, it's really bad. Whatever it is really, really bad,
ah,
right?
yeah,
So, and I get that. Like, I get the impetus for that. Hey, I don't want the boys to cry because when the men cry, it means whatever's going on is horrible, right? We're in, World War II or whatever the thing is. We're in something really bad. So I get the motivation behind that, right? But the reality is, we all have hearts. We all need to cry. We need to process these things. And then when we do, we get to the other side. So like I'm a surfer, and I've tried to teach people to surf sometimes. And a lot of times, like you're paddling out to go out, and there's the big line of breakers. And I've had a few people get right in the line of breakers, and they're like, nope, no, dude,
The
I'm not going
fear.
any farther. I'm not going any farther. This sucks. I'm getting my ass kicked. And I'm like, no, trust me. 10 more yards. We're outside the breakers, and it's going to be great. But nobody wants to go out there, right? Because if
Yeah.
you got to go through the breakers. So
It's
like
such a metaphor for so many things.
right. And so like my practice is the Robert Frost quote, the only way out is through, because I would argue most people in society are on the beach, they're looking out at the waves, they're like, fuck that, I'm not going out there. Whereas the people who are lucky in a sense, and I agree with you completely that it comes from trauma, right? I mean, I can feel it, right? We all have a story. We all have gone through these things. And that's what gives us, in a good way, like the confidence to share our hardships, because we know it is safe on the other side of those breakers. We paddled through it because we kind of have, maybe we're forced to, but whatever, we see that, right? And we're just like, hey, it's okay. You can be hurt, you can be sad, we can cry, because the other side is so awesome.
That's the thing, though, right there. You can be hurt. Like the fear is not necessarily wrong. A breaker is called a breaker. Like it'll beat your ass up, but it's like I can't imagine like having a baby. I always use this analogy for so many things, but it's like women are just built for it. I believe emotionally, psychologically, and obviously physically. You see it, you've seen like we all got here that way, but man, it's like when it's my stomach's this big, and the canal's this big.
It's ticking. It's coming.
It's coming. There's no stopping it. So when you can stop it, when you could go, no, I'm not walking into that, getting beat up like that or getting hurt that bad.
Right.
Of course. How many women would back out if there was a chance to stop it?
Right. And it's like that thing of like, and to the point you were making about the breakers, I have two things. Like, the fear, is it rational or irrational, is something that I think that cognitive behavioral therapy has helped me quite a bit with, where it's like, on a scale from 1 to 100, if this thing happens, is it going to kill me? Like like you have to feel sore when you first start working out, and then you get over the aches, and then you feel incredible. And it reminded me of one of the first times I had one of the ketamine infusions. I had a vision of approaching a waterfall of sand. And I just remember it being very grainy, and I was approaching it and I was scared. I'm like, if I run into this, I'm going to die. And I couldn't stop myself. And I went right through it and to the other side. And I had that moment of like, I'm alive. Like I did it. There's nothing to be afraid of, and it was this irrational fear. And it almost was kind of like, that's the thing I loved about the treatment, was it personified, it gave me like visuals to irrational fears that I was able to see and go through, and then look back and go, oh, I'm still here. Like, it's okay. And that literally changed the tune. Like it flipped the album, and I was playing a whole new side of it, and I think that's such an important thing that you said about like, it's such an interesting like thing to remember, is just go through it and get to the other side. And it's a scary place, but it's so great. It's a good scared. It's a rational fear. It's not an irrational fear.
But you find out where the line really is, because sometimes the rational fear is rational, like with the surfing, right? But there's where you think the line is, I think, is not necessarily true. Right. So then now we get up to the line, and when we have that trust or that whatever, like you say, if we are given mindset, where you say like it personified it. So now so it gave me a way of looking at it, because I have such a strong belief about this, that our mindset, like as I deal with my anxiety or whatever, now that I quit smoking pot, I think it's Harry Potter's. I always go back to it, but they have these things called the Dementors, right? And they feed on all of your negative emotions, and they will literally suck the life out of you till you die. And the Patronus charm is you think of the happiest thought you can think, and then you cut it loose, right? And that it's personified as a light, and then it chases them away. And I think that's our mindset, right?
Yeah.
So if we can figure out how to get in the mindset where we can go up to the line of where we think that the rational fear stops, and then death is on the other side of it, and then you find out, oh, it was not there.
Yeah.
But you can't without that mindset. So now I'm just like, I do this now that I quit smoking pot. I'm like, okay, you feel I work out, and now I've got some of the physical anxiety, stretch that rubber band out, and then now how do I flip my mindset? And sometimes, like you were saying before, Andy, like you could see a massive change like that.
Yeah.
Right? It's really
It's
almost
amazing.
miraculous. Yeah, because it's
Amazing.
And it's a combination
could-
also, right? For each human being, right?
yeah.
We're all
Yes,
different.
that's a great way to think about it.
Right? Because for some people, like some people say to me, like, how do you do therapy? Like, God, does it drive you crazy dealing with all these different people's problems? What's so interesting is that each person is different on how to unlock that thing. And I don't know what it is for each person. Like you mentioned that Harry Potter part, he was saved by the buck. And what did he do? He thought it was his parents or his dad.
He
or
thought
whatever.
it was his dad. Yeah, and Hermione goes, that was you.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
minimized himself, right? Which is very human, right? Because again, that negativity bias. But then it's like, then you find out, hey, that was you, and it's
That was you.
like I have all this power. I can't believe it. And to me, that's one of the wonderful things, right? I mean, bring it back to the Grateful Dead, because there's all this magic and all this power in our community. I think that's what Deadheads start to see is that, and I don't think this is religious, what I'm about to say. We're all God's children. We are all children of this world. And thusly, we have this amazing ability and light and multifaceted, diamonds, if you will. And we're all that. And so when we're seeking a strong man or someone else to solve the problem, I get it. Like I get we all want to be scooped up and everyone, have that beat. But the reality is it's in all of us, right? And really we can just do that with each other and be collaborative, right? That's what we talk a lot about in our house, is like because ego is the enemy, then collaboration is the right? And that's why I think our community is so powerful because we know that as deadheads, right? We just know it. I mean, you started going to shows when I was a teenager and I love the ethos, but I think the reason was, I went through a lot of hard stuff like I was mentioning, and the dead were my family, and are my family, but it's because I was loved unconditionally. I could be a kid from Greenwich, Connecticut, or from Indiana. It doesn't matter where you're from or where how much money you have or what color you are or anything. You have the absolute freedom to be who you are in this space. And that is what we do as therapists, right? We do what they call unconditional positive regard. And essentially it's unconditional love. And it's what we wish we got from all of our parents, and I love my parents, but parents have hopes for us, right? They want you to be something, or they think your hair should be this length, or you should wear these clothes, or whatever these things are. There's little conditions that you feel. And those conditions, they create tension essentially, right? And so, but when we can accept fully, and as a therapist, that's what we do. We our job is to have someone tell us what's going on for them, and then we help them get what they want, not what we want, what they want.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that you're really into the environment, and I know that your job with Chevron's really lucrative, but have you thought about like that tension there, And so we poke at those things to help people see that, but no matter what, it is from that same ethos, and to me, that's what Jerry was all about, right? No bullshit. It's going to be genuine, and thusly we're going to love you fully for who you are, and you could be a Hell's Angel or a priest or whatever. It doesn't matter. You've got value, right? And so that feeling, I think, is what definitely attracts so many of us to this scene, because we feel like we're being held in a good way, that we're being loved, and we are thusly kind to each other because we see how that's so great. Excuse me, brother, that kind of vibe, right? And so then we feel this amazing empowerment because we see how if we can do this scene, at Oracle Park in July, why can't we do this scene, all over the whole world, right?
Yeah.
That's been a big motivation for me with, whether it's Grateful Guitars, but especially like this documentary. I love doing psychotherapy, but it's still one person at a time. And so as I've gotten a little older, I'm kind of like, God, I gotta somehow get these messages out because it's not rocket science, and one of the frustrations I have is we used to teach philosophy, we used to teach psychology in high schools, right?
Yeah.
Now, what do we teach? It's all hyper focused on STEM. And why is it on STEM? Because we've decided that like those are the skills that matter, and then you're gonna become, something in tech, and then maybe you'll be a venture capitalist, and then you'll be rich. And that's really what we're all about here, isn't it? It's just about that. And it's so against the what humans need, right? We need to remember that we do our best work when we are collaborative, right? When we're all together, when we're arm in arm. And that's what you saw in the Grateful Dead, right? I mean, it's ironic because the Grateful Dead has morphed so much, over time. And I think you kind of see, the different entities. I have a nickname for the shadow side of that, which is the Greedful Dead, right?
Yeah.
We have and sometimes I'll say that to people I work with. I'm like, oh, I don't know, that feels a little Grateful Dead or whatever. Or that person's kind of playing in that pool because it's not, it really ideally wouldn't be about ego, right? Because when we truly work in collaboration, when we strive for high core values, we are liberated. We don't have, it's not about us. It's about that up there, right? And so you take it apart and you say, well, gosh, we're at a soccer game. We've decided that it's Wilton versus New Canaan, and there's a line between the two, but someone drew a map, as you said, just to decide that Wilton is here and New Canaan is here, and so you have to hate each other now. It's like, well, wait, why does that have to be? Like I used to work with kids in gangs, and like I totally got the belonging part. Like that's awesome.
Yes. That's how they get you. That's how the Klan
right.
They take these kids that they've come from the most toxic home situations, and they give you a brotherhood. So I get that part.
Right.
But now it's based on who we're against.
Yeah. And that doesn't have to be there, right? We don't need that part. We can do the belonging without the hating on the...
Yeah. One thing that strikes me about the Grateful Dead community too is the way it deals with masculinity. Like when you could see a guy in a dress, like, people are afraid to dance because now everybody's looking at me, and but this dude can be dancing weird and he's totally into it.
Yep.
And he could actually be not only just look weird, like this used to be considered looking weird, and probably still doesn't, but he could be in a dress and dancing like just nuts, and everybody's like, cool, man. That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
That's pretty. How many other places in Western society nowadays do you find that?
Drummer from my favorite band, Fish, wearing a dress every show. And people go, is that the band wearing a dress? I go, oh, yeah, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
that is it. Yeah. You got it.
Yep.
Because then that empowers everyone else.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I don't want to end the conversation, but I have to roll. So you guys keep going or come back on, whatever you guys would like. But I have to bounce because I got to go to the dentist. But
do your thing, man.
We'll see you. Please come back again.
Anytime, Mike. Oh my God.
Yeah, this was incredible. All right.
I love it too. Anytime, and good luck with your surgery. I hope it goes well and happy holidays.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy holidays. See you soon.
Love you, dude.